It was an ordinary Tuesday evening at Wilson's Toy Emporium in Atlanta, the kind of evening where the fluorescent lights cast their familiar glow over aisles of colorful toys, and the gentle hum of the air conditioning provided a steady backdrop to children's distant laughter. Lisa Wallace, the store manager, had seen countless families come and go during her 15 years of service, but something about tonight felt different, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. The store was relatively quiet, save for a few last-minute shoppers meandering through the aisles. Among them was a young mother, Beverly Davis, attempting to console her crying son while juggling what appeared to be the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her son, barely 7 years old, stood in front of a modestly priced action figure, tears streaming down his face as he tried to understand why they couldn't afford it. "I'm so sorry, baby," Beverly whispered, her voice cracking slightly as she knelt beside him. "Maybe next month, when things are a little better." The words seemed to hang heavy in the air, a promise both mother and child knew might be hard to keep. Lisa had seen this scene play out countless times before. The heartbreak of a parent unable to fulfill their child's simple wish. The quiet dignity of those struggling to make ends meet. She was about to approach them with her usual compassionate smile when the store's entrance chimed and a shadow fell across the threshold that seemed to encompass the entire doorway. Shaquille O'Neal ducked slightly as he entered, his 7'1" frame making the store's entrance appear almost comically small. But it wasn't his height that caught everyone's attention. It was the warmth of his presence, the way his eyes scanned the store with genuine interest, rather than the detached gaze of a celebrity trying to avoid attention. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The few customers present tried their best not to stare, but it was hard not to notice the NBA legend casually browsing through the toy aisles as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Kyle Arnold, a teenage employee restocking the shelves, nearly dropped an entire box of board games when he realized who had just walked in. Shaq moved through the store with surprising grace for someone his size, occasionally picking up toys and examining them with childlike curiosity. But then he heard it, the soft whimper of a child trying to be brave, trying to accept disappointment with grace beyond his years. The sound drew his attention to Beverly and her son, still standing in the action figure aisle. The boy had managed to quiet his tears, but his small shoulders still shook with suppressed sobs. Beverly was now trying to interest him in a smaller, less expensive toy, her own heart clearly breaking at having to deny her child something that, in the grand scheme of things, seemed so simple. What happened next would become a story passed down through generations of Wilson's Toy Emporium employees. Shaq approached the pair, his steps deliberately gentle, his presence somehow both massive and non-threatening. "Hey, little man," he said, his voice carrying the kind of warmth that made everyone in earshot feel like they were being wrapped in a comfortable blanket. "What's got you so down?" The boy looked up, his eyes widening to the size of saucers as he realized who was speaking to him. Beverly stood frozen, one hand protectively on her son's shoulder, the other clutching her worn purse a little tighter. I wanted this action figure," the boy managed to say, pointing to the toy he had been admiring. "But Mom says we have to wait." Shaq knelt down, bringing himself closer to the child's eye level, though even kneeling, he towered over both mother and son. He picked up the action figure, turning it over in his hands as if it were the most interesting thing he'd ever seen. "You know what?" he said, a smile spreading across his face. "I think this action figure needs a home, and I bet it's got some friends in this store that need homes too." Before anyone could process what was happening, Shaq turned to Lisa, who had been watching the scene unfold from behind the counter. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the store, "I'd like to buy every toy in this store." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the store's background music seemed to pause in astonishment. Lisa blinked, certain she had misheard. Every toy, sir? Every single one, Shaq confirmed, his smile growing wider. And I want to start with this little man's action figure right here. What unfolded over the next few hours would become legendary in the store's history. Shaq didn't just buy the toys, he turned it into an event. He asked every child in the store and called friends to bring their children to help him pick out toys for donation. He shared stories about his own childhood, about times when toys were a luxury his family couldn't always afford, and about the importance of giving back. Beverly's son found himself at the center of it all, helping Shaq organize toys into piles, his earlier tears completely forgotten. Beverly watched, alternating between wiping away tears of joy and laughing at her son's excitement as he ran from aisle to aisle with his new friend, who happened to be one of the most famous basketball players in history, Andrew Liu, a local reporter who happened to be shopping for his nephew, captured the entire scene on his phone. The footage would later go viral, but it wasn't the grand gesture of buying out the store that captured people's hearts. It was the small moments. Shaq helping a child reach a toy on the top shelf, his patient smile as he listened to excited kids explaining their favorite games, the way he made sure every child in the store felt special. As the evening wore on, more people began arriving at the store, drawn by texts and social media posts from those inside. Shaq welcomed them all, turning what had started as a simple act of kindness into a community event. He arranged for trucks to deliver the toys to local children's hospitals and community centers, ensuring that his generosity would reach far beyond the walls of Wilson's Toy Emporium. Lisa Wallace found herself overwhelmed by the logistics of processing such a massive purchase, but Shaq's easygoing nature made everything feel manageable. He insisted on helping the staff box up toys, his huge hands making quick work of what would normally be an hours-long process. "You know," he said to Lisa as they worked, "sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest moments. If I hadn't walked in when I did, if that brave little man hadn't been honest about his disappointment, none of this would have happened." The story could have ended there, with the purchase of thousands of toys and the joy brought to countless children. But Shaq wasn't finished. He approached Beverly and her son as the evening was winding down, kneeling once again to the boy's eye level. "Thank you for helping me tonight, little man," he said, his voice serious despite his smile. "You taught me something important. Sometimes when we're sad about something, it's not just about us. It's an opportunity to help others who might be feeling the same way." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card, handing it to Beverly. "I have a foundation that helps families in need," he explained. "I'd like to help you and your son if you'll let me, not just with toys, but with whatever you need to make sure this little man has every opportunity to succeed." Beverly tried to protest, to say they couldn't accept such generosity, but Shaq held up a hand. "The greatest gift you can give someone," he said, "is allowing them to help others. You and your son helped me do something amazing tonight. Let me return the favor." As the last customers left the store and the staff began the monumental task of processing the biggest sale in the store's history, the impact of what had happened began to sink in. It wasn't just about the toys or even the money. It was about how one moment of empathy had created a ripple effect of kindness that would touch countless lives. The next day, as the story began spreading across social media and news outlets, it wasn't the celebrity angle that captured people's attention. It was the reminder that sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness start with simply noticing someone else's pain and deciding to do something about it. Lisa Wallace would later tell her grandchildren about that night, about how one of the Biggest stars in basketball history had turned an ordinary Tuesday evening into something magical. But she always emphasized that the real magic wasn't in the grand gesture. It was in the moment Shaq decided to stop and talk to a crying child, to see not just the tears, but the opportunity to make a difference. The story of that night at Wilson's Toy Emporium would be told and retold, shared across social media and discussed in conversations about kindness and generosity. But for those who were there, who witnessed it firsthand, it would always be remembered not for the headlines it generated, but for the simple truth it demonstrated. That sometimes the biggest changes in the world start with noticing one person's struggle and deciding to help. Beverly and her son became regular volunteers at Shaq's foundation, helping other families who found themselves in similar situations. The boy's action figure sat proudly on his shelf, not just as a toy, but as a reminder that kindness can come from unexpected places and that every tear has the potential to become a spark for change. And in the years that followed, whenever someone would ask Shaq about that night, he would smile and say the same thing. "I didn't change that boy's life. He changed mine." He reminded me that sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest moments, and that we all have the power to turn someone's tears into smiles. The story of that Tuesday evening became more than just a viral moment or a heartwarming news piece. It became a reminder that in a world that often seems divided and cold, simple acts of kindness have the power to create ripples that touch countless lives. And it all started because one person decided to stop and ask a crying child what was wrong. As Lisa Wallace locked up the store that night, long after Shaq and the last customers had left, she looked at the empty shelves and smiled. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of restocking, of returning the store to its normal state. But she knew that Wilson's Toy Emporium would never be quite the same. It had become a place where magic happened, where kindness transformed tears into joy, and where one ordinary Tuesday evening became an extraordinary reminder of the power of human connection. The security cameras would later show Shaq helping the staff clean up, pushing brooms and straightening displays, insisting on being treated like any other helper rather than the celebrity he was. It was these moments, captured without fanfare or attention, that perhaps best illustrated the true nature of his kindness. Not performed for cameras or acclaim, but simply because it was the right thing to do. And somewhere in Atlanta, a little boy fell asleep clutching his new action figure. His dreams filled not with the toy itself, but with the memory of how it felt to help make other children's dreams come true. His mother sat in their small living room, looking at the card Shaq had given her, and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The morning after Shaquille O'Neal's incredible act of kindness at Wilson's Toy Emporium, Atlanta woke to a story that would touch hearts across the nation. John McCarthy, a local news anchor, leaned forward in his chair as he prepared to share the story that had already begun spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. In an age where celebrity encounters often make headlines for the wrong reasons, John began, his voice carrying the warmth the story deserved. What happened last night at a local toy store reminds us of the extraordinary impact one person's compassion can have. The footage Andrew Liu had captured began playing across screens throughout the city, but what the viral videos didn't show was what happened in the quiet hours that followed, as the ripples of Shaq's kindness began to spread through the community in unexpected ways. Meshri Reed, a nurse at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, was just beginning her morning shift when the first trucks began arriving. The delivery drivers, led by Chad Lamb, had been working since dawn to ensure that the toys would reach their destinations before the children woke up. What they didn't expect was the chain reaction their arrival would trigger. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Chad said, helping to unload boxes of toys. But I've never seen anything quite like this. It's not just about the toys, it's about what they represent. Hope, you know. Inside the hospital, Cynthia Guzman, a child life specialist, watched as the first boxes were opened. She had seen countless donations over the years, but something about this one felt different. Perhaps it was because she had been there the previous evening, shopping for her nephew, when Shaq transformed an ordinary night into something magical. The thing that struck me most, Cynthia would later tell reporters, wasn't just Shaq's generosity. It was how he turned one child's disappointment into an opportunity to help hundreds of others. He showed us all that sometimes our lowest moments can become catalysts for change. As the morning progressed, more stories began emerging. Angel Martinez, one of the teenage volunteers at the hospital, remembered the moment they began distributing the toys to the children's rooms. There was this little girl, Angel recalled, her voice soft with emotion, who hadn't smiled in days. But when she saw the basketball signed by Shaq that came with her new doll, her whole face lit up. It wasn't just about the gifts, it was about feeling seen, feeling remembered. Back at Wilson's Toy Emporium, Lisa Wallace arrived early to find a line of people waiting outside. But they weren't there to shop, they were there to help. Word had spread through local community groups, and volunteers had shown up to assist with the massive task of reorganizing the store and processing the paperwork for Shaq's unprecedented purchase. Among them was David Smith, a local business owner who had been moved by the story. "I saw the video last night," he explained, as he helped move empty display cases. "And I realized something. We often talk about wanting to make a difference, but we wait for the perfect moment, the big gesture. Shaq showed us that sometimes all it takes is stopping to notice someone's pain and deciding to do something about it." The story continued to unfold throughout the day. Robert Simpson, a social worker who had been helping Beverly Davis and her son navigate difficult times, arrived at the store to witness the aftermath of the previous night's events. What he found was more than just an empty toy store being restocked. He found a community being transformed. What Shaq did wasn't just about buying toys, Robert observed, watching as volunteers worked together to prepare the store for its regular business day. He created a moment that reminded people of their own capacity for kindness, and that's something that multiplies. By midday, the story had reached national news networks. Michael Washington, a veteran reporter, arrived to cover what had become much more than a simple celebrity good deed. As he interviewed people who had witnessed the events of the previous night, a pattern began to emerge. Everyone spoke, not just of Shaq's generosity, but of the way he had transformed a single act of kindness into a community-wide movement. The really remarkable thing, Michael would later report, is how this has sparked a chain reaction of generosity. People aren't just talking about what Shaq did. They're asking themselves what they can do in their own communities. At the local community center, where many of the toys were being distributed, Catherine McGrath watched as families came together to help sort and organize the donations. "What's beautiful," she noted, "is seeing how people are building on Shaq's initial gesture. They're not just passing out toys. They're creating connections, building relationships, strengthening our community fabric." The afternoon brought another surprise as Shaq himself returned to the store, this time with a team of people from his foundation. He met with Beverly Davis and her son again, but this time they weren't alone. Other families who had been struggling, identified through local social services and community organizations, had been invited to join them. Eric Carrillo, one of the foundation's coordinators, explained the broader vision. "What happened last night was incredible, but Shaq wanted to ensure it wasn't just a one-time thing. He's working with local organizations, to create sustainable programs that will help families in similar situations. As the day progressed, more stories emerged of how the previous night's events had inspired others to act. Patrick Gibson, owner of a local restaurant, announced he would begin providing free meals to families in need. Robin Baker, a teacher at a nearby school, started organizing a program to help students access educational toys and supplies. But perhaps the most touching moment came late in the afternoon when Beverly's son returned to the store with a hand-drawn thank you card for Lisa Wallace and the staff. The card wasn't just for the toys, it was for being part of a moment that had changed his perspective on what it means to receive and give help. Mom says that when good things happen to us, we should find ways to help others too, he explained, his voice carrying a wisdom beyond his years. So I'm going to save some of my allowance each week to buy toys for other kids who might be sad like I was. Lisa Quinn, another employee who had witnessed both the previous night's events and the day's aftermath, found herself moved to tears by the child's words. That's the real magic of what Shaq did, she reflected. He didn't just give toys. He gave people a vision of how they could be part of something bigger than themselves. As evening approached, the store had been completely restocked, thanks to the combined efforts of staff, volunteers, and community members. But something had changed. The aisles that had been emptied by Shaq's generosity had been refilled not just with toys, but with a new sense of purpose. Paul Hansen, a local photographer documenting the day's events, captured images that would later become part of a photo essay about community transformation. What struck me, he said, reviewing his photos, was how many different people came together. Rich, poor, young, old. Everyone wanted to be part of this story, to add their own chapter to what Shaq had started. The day's events culminated in an impromptu community gathering at the store. Deborah Kelly, a community organizer who had helped coordinate the volunteer efforts, spoke to the assembled crowd. What we've witnessed here is more than just a celebrity being generous, she said. We've seen how one person's decision to act with kindness can inspire an entire community to open their hearts. As night fell and the store prepared to close for the second time in 24 hours, Lisa Wallace found herself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. The store's shelves were full again, but they represented something different now. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable things we can give aren't the items we sell, but the hope we share. Isaiah Allen, one of the last volunteers to leave, summed up what many were feeling. You know what's really amazing, he said, helping to lock up. Yesterday, this was just a toy store. Today, it's become a symbol of what's possible when people decide to care about each other. The story didn't end there. In the days and weeks that followed, the impact of that Tuesday night continued to grow. Jack Fisher, a local businessman inspired by the events, established a foundation to help struggling families access educational resources. Lacey Orozco, a social media influencer, started a campaign to highlight and support local acts of kindness. But perhaps the most significant change was less visible, but more profound. In countless homes across Atlanta, parents began having different conversations with their children about generosity, community, and the power of turning personal disappointment into opportunities to help others. Beverly Davis and her son became regular visitors to the store, not to shop, but to help identify families who might need assistance. The action figure that had started it all sat proudly on her son's shelf, but it had become more than just a toy. It was a reminder that sometimes our lowest moments can lead to our greatest opportunities to make a difference. As the story continued to spread, people began sharing their own experiences of unexpected kindness, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond Atlanta. Mary Ruiz, a teacher in a neighboring city, used the story to teach her students about empathy and community service. What happened in that toy store she explained to her class, shows us that we all have the power to transform someone's moment of sadness into an opportunity for joy. The security footage from that Tuesday night became more than just a viral video. It became a teaching tool in businesses and schools, demonstrating how authentic kindness and genuine connection can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. And somewhere in Atlanta, a little boy who had once cried over an action figure he couldn't have was learning a different kind of lesson about value. Not the price of toys, but the worth of kindness, the importance of community, and the power each person has to make a difference in someone else's life. The story of Shaq's visit to Wilson's Toy Emporium didn't end with empty shelves being refilled or viral videos being shared. It continued in the small acts of kindness it inspired, in the connections it helped forge, and in the reminder it provided to everyone who heard it. That sometimes the most powerful changes start with simply noticing someone's pain and deciding to do something about it. As Lisa Wallace would later write in the store's newsletter, what happened here wasn't just about toys or even about generosity. It was about seeing the potential in every moment, even the difficult ones, to create positive change. It was about recognizing that sometimes our greatest gifts come not from what we receive, but from what we're inspired to give to others. And in that way, the story became more than just a heartwarming tale of celebrity kindness. It became a testament to the power of community, a reminder of the impact one person's choices can have, and an inspiration for countless others to find their own ways to transform moments of sadness into opportunities for joy. A week after Shaquille O'Neal's transformative night at Wilson's Toy Emporium, the story continued to evolve in ways nobody could have predicted. Bianca Andrews, a documentary filmmaker who had been following stories of community transformation, arrived in Atlanta to capture what had become known as the Shaq effect. Not just the initial act of kindness, but the waves of change it had sparked throughout the city. What interests me most, Bianca explained as she set up her equipment in the toy store's now famous aisles, isn't just what happened that night, but how one moment of genuine connection can reshape an entire community's understanding of what's possible. The morning began with Lisa Wallace opening the store as usual, but nothing about Wilson's Toy Emporium was quite the same anymore. The shelves were fully stocked again, but each aisle now held a different kind of energy, a reminder of the night when emptiness had transformed into opportunity. Chad Price, one of the regular customers who had witnessed Shaq's act of kindness, had started a weekly program where local business owners could sponsor toys for families in need. It's not about matching what Shaq did in scale, Chad explained to Bianca's camera. It's about maintaining that spirit of connection and support he showed us was possible. The documentary team captured Beverly Davis and her son returning to the store, not as customers this time, but as volunteers. The boy who had once cried over an action figure now helped other children find joy in the toy aisles, his own experience becoming a bridge of understanding and empathy. The most beautiful thing, Beverly shared, watching her son guide a shy child through the action figure section, is seeing how he's learned that our hardest moments can become gifts we give to others. He doesn't just see toys anymore, he sees opportunities to connect. Eric Horn, a child psychologist who had been studying the impact of community support on childhood development, began documenting the changes he observed in children who had been touched by the event. What we're seeing goes beyond simple generosity, he noted. These children are learning fundamental lessons about empathy, community, and the circular nature of giving and receiving. The cameras followed Michael Wright, a local community organizer, as he worked to establish what would become known as the Toy Bridge Initiative. a program inspired by Shaq's actions that connected local businesses with families in need. What Shaq showed us wasn't just about toys, Michael explained. It was about recognizing that every business, every individual, has the power to be a bridge between need and abundance. Throughout the morning, Bianca's team captured the subtle ways the store had evolved. Lisa Quinn, who had been part of the original night's events, pointed out the new community corner they had established, a space where families could leave notes about needs or offers of help. "It's become more than a retail space," Lisa explained, straightening a stack of handwritten cards. "It's a hub where people come to connect, to share stories, and to find ways to help each other. The toys are still important, but they're now vehicles for something much deeper." The documentary captured moments that might have seemed ordinary to casual observers, but carried profound significance for those involved. Paul Hansen, now a regular volunteer, helped a young mother who reminded him of Beverly navigate the aisles with her children. The interaction wasn't just about finding the right toy, it was about sharing the story, about showing another parent that they weren't alone. Jeffrey Owens, who owned a small cafe across the street, had started providing free meals to families who came to the toy store for assistance. What happened here that night with Shaq? It wasn't just about one person's generosity, he reflected. It was about all of us recognizing that we have the power to create these moments of connection and support. As the day progressed, the documentary team witnessed what had become a regular occurrence at Wilson's Toy Emporium: spontaneous acts of kindness sparked by strangers helping strangers. Jennifer Bell, a local teacher, brought her entire class to the store to learn about community service and the power of giving back. "These children are learning something profound," Jennifer explained, as her students carefully selected toys to donate. "They're learning that kindness isn't just about grand gestures. It's about being attentive to the needs around us and finding ways, big or small, to meet them." The afternoon brought an unexpected visit from Robin Baker, a social worker who had been studying the broader impact of what had happened. "What we're seeing here is a paradigm shift," Robin observed, watching the interactions throughout the store. "People aren't just coming here to buy or receive toys. They're coming to be part of a story that's still unfolding." The cameras captured a powerful moment when a young mother, much like Beverly had been that fateful night, stood in an aisle trying to explain to her child why they couldn't afford a particular toy. Before the situation could escalate, Beverly's son approached them, sharing his own story and introducing them to the community support system that had grown out of his experience. "Sometimes," Beverly explained later to the documentary team, "the most powerful thing we can offer someone isn't a solution to their problem, but the knowledge that they're not facing it alone." As the afternoon wore on, the documentary captured the arrival of Timothy Roth, a representative from Shaq's Foundation who had come to meet with Lisa Wallace about expanding the program to other stores in the area. "What happened here wasn't just a one-time event," Timothy emphasized. "It's become a model for how businesses can become catalysts for community connection and support." The cameras followed Timothy as he toured the store, noting the various ways the space had been transformed. The giving tree near the entrance, where people could leave or take notes about needed items. The story corner, where children shared their experiences of giving and receiving. The community board, filled with photos and notes from families whose lives had been touched by the growing network of support. Kyle Arnold, who had been working at the store the night of Shaq's visit, had taken on a new role coordinating volunteer efforts. "What's amazing," he shared with the documentary team, "is how organic it all feels now. We're not trying to recreate what happened that night. We're building on the spirit of connection it revealed was possible." The documentary captured moments throughout the day that illustrated how the store had become more than just a retail space. Aaron Berry, a local artist, had started offering free art classes in the store's community room, using creativity as a way to help children process and express their experiences of giving and receiving. Art has a way of helping us see beyond the surface, Aaron explained, as children worked on a collaborative mural depicting their understanding of community and kindness. These kids aren't just drawing pictures, they're imagining new ways of being together, of supporting each other. As evening approached, the documentary team filmed what had become a daily tradition at the store, the Gratitude Circle, where staff, volunteers and community members gathered to share stories and plan future initiatives. Lisa Wallace led the circle, but it was clear that everyone present felt ownership of what the space had become. What we're witnessing here, Bianca reflected as she captured the scene, isn't just the aftermath of a celebrity's generous act. It's the emergence of a new kind of community space, one where the lines between giving and receiving, between helper and helped, have become beautifully blurred. The day's filming concluded with a powerful moment as Beverly's son showed the documentary team his prized action figure, the one that had started it all. But now it sat among other toys, some received, some given away, each with its own story of connection and community. This isn't just about toys anymore, Beverly explained, watching her son arrange the figures. It's about what happens when we allow our moments of need to become bridges to others who might be feeling the same way. The documentary captured the closing of the store that evening, but the energy of the space remained vibrant. Andrew Pierce, a regular volunteer, helped Lisa Wallace arrange the next day's community programs. What's beautiful, he observed, is how this has become so much more than we could have imagined. Every day, we're discovering new ways to build on what Shaq started. As the camera crew packed up their equipment, Bianca reflected on what they had captured. This story isn't just about one night of extraordinary generosity, she noted. It's about how that moment awakened something in this community, a recognition that we all have the power to transform ordinary spaces into places of extraordinary connection. The documentary would go on to capture how the ripples from that night continued to spread. Mary Reed, a nurse who had received some of the original toys for her pediatric ward, had started a program bringing together children from different economic backgrounds to learn about giving and receiving. These children are teaching us something profound, she shared. They're showing us that when we share our stories of vulnerability, we create spaces where real connection can happen. The film crew's final shots of the day captured the store's new window display, a collection of photographs showing moments of connection that had happened in the space since Shaq's visit. Each image told a story of how one act of kindness had multiplied, creating a web of support that continued to grow. What we're really documenting here, Bianca concluded as they finished filming, isn't just about toys or even about generosity. It's about how one moment of authentic connection can reveal possibilities we never imagined, possibilities that were always there, waiting for someone to show us how to see them. As night fell and the last of the crew packed up their equipment, Lisa Wallace stood in the quiet store, surrounded by the evidence of how much had changed. The shelves were full again, but they held more than just toys now. They held the stories of countless connections made, lessons learned, and lives touched by what had started as one man's response to a child's tears. Sometimes, she reflected, looking at the community board filled with notes and photos, the most valuable thing we can offer each other isn't things at all. It's the recognition that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves, something that grows stronger every time we choose to reach out and connect. The documentary would go on to capture many more stories in the days that followed, but that day at Wilson's Toy Emporium had revealed the heart of what had happened. how one act of kindness had awakened a community to its own capacity for connection and care, creating ripples that continue to transform lives in ways both large and small. And somewhere in Atlanta, a boy who had once cried over a toy he couldn't have was learning to see himself not as someone who had received help, but as someone who had become part of a larger story. A story about how moments of need can become opportunities for connection, and how ordinary places can become extraordinary when filled with the spirit of genuine care and community. 1 month after Shaquille O'Neal's transformative visit to Wilson's Toy Emporium, the impact of that single evening had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. Aaron Sanders, a sociology professor at the local university, stood in the store's community room, surrounded by charts and data that tracked what he called the ripple effect of radical kindness. "What we're seeing here," Aaron explained to a group of graduate students, "isn't just about charity or giving. It's about how one authentic moment of connection can catalyze a complete restructuring of community relationships." The morning sun filtered through the newly installed windows of what had once been simply a storage room. Now, the space served as a community hub, where Lisa Wallace and her team coordinated an ever-growing network of initiatives that had sprung from Shaq's initial act of kindness. David Smith, one of the regular volunteers who had been present on the original night, was organizing the day's activities. The store had evolved into something far more complex than a retail space. It had become what the community affectionately called the heart space. "Today's schedule shows just how far we've come," David noted, pointing to a whiteboard filled with events. "We have the morning toy distribution program, afternoon mentoring sessions, evening community planning meetings, and throughout the day, we're hosting what we call connection corners, spaces where people can share their stories and find support." Cynthia Jackson, a child psychologist who had begun studying the impact of the store's transformation on local families, observed a morning session where children from different backgrounds came together to learn about empathy and community through play. "What's remarkable," Cynthia shared, making notes in her research journal, "is how these children have naturally adopted the language of connection and support. They don't see giving and receiving as separate actions anymore. They understand it as part of the same circle of community care." The morning's activities were interrupted by an unexpected visit from Beverly Davis and her son, who had become unofficial ambassadors of the program. They had just returned from speaking at a conference about community transformation, where they had shared their story of how a moment of personal disappointment had evolved into a movement of collective hope. "The most powerful thing," Beverly explained to a group of visitors, "isn't just what Shaq did that night. It's how his actions showed us all what was possible when we start seeing each other's struggles as opportunities for connection rather than moments to turn away from." Lisa Quinn, who had been tracking the store's impact through stories and testimonials, presented her latest findings to the sociology students. "In the past month alone, we've seen over 200 spontaneous acts of community support emerge. From connections made in this space, people aren't just coming here to give or receive anymore. They're coming here to be part of something larger than themselves." The morning's documentation was being captured by Andrew Liu, whose original footage of Shaq's visit had gone viral. He had decided to create a long-term chronicle of how the community was evolving. "What's fascinating," he observed, adjusting his camera to capture a group of children teaching each other about sharing, "is how organic this all feels. Nothing here feels forced or artificial. It's as if Shaq's actions simply revealed what was possible, and the community naturally grew into that possibility." Patrick Gibson, who had been inspired to start a similar program at his restaurant, arrived to share his experiences with the sociology team. "What we learned from Wilson's Toy Emporium is that any business can become a hub for community connection. It's not about the products we sell, it's about the spaces we create for people to come together and support each other. The afternoon brought a special session led by Isaiah Allen, a local teacher who had developed a curriculum around what he called compassionate commerce, a new way of thinking about business that put community connection at the center of every transaction. What happened here that night with Shaq wasn't just about generosity, Isaiah explained to a group of local business owners. It was about reimagining what a business could be in the life of a community. Every purchase, every interaction became an opportunity for deeper connection. As the day progressed, the store welcomed Eric Carrillo, who had been studying the economic impact of the transformation. What's remarkable, he shared, reviewing his data, is how this new model of community-centered business hasn't hurt the store's bottom line. It's actually improved it. People aren't just coming here to buy toys anymore. They're coming here to be part of something meaningful, and that creates a different kind of customer loyalty. The afternoon sessions included a remarkable moment when Robin Baker, a child who had received toys during the original distribution, returned with her family to help organize a giving event for other children. "I learned that getting help doesn't mean you're weak," she explained, carefully arranging dolls on a shelf. "It means you're part of a community that cares about each other." Lisa Wallace took a moment to reflect on how the store's physical space had evolved. The aisles were still full of toys, but now each section included comfortable seating areas where people could talk and connect. The walls were covered with photos and stories of community members helping each other, creating what they called their kindness gallery. "The toys are still important," Lisa explained to a visiting journalist, "but they're not the main focus anymore. They're more like conversation starters, bridges that help people connect and share their stories." The late afternoon brought a special ceremony where John McCarthy, a local business leader, announced the creation of a fund to help other stores in the area transform into similar community hubs. "What we've witnessed here isn't just about one store or one night of generosity," he declared. "It's about reimagining how businesses can serve as anchors for community connection and support." Michael Wright, who'd been skeptical of the sustainability of the program initially, shared his observations with the sociology students. "What makes this work," he explained, "is that it's not built on dependency or traditional charity. It's built on the recognition that we all have something to give and something to receive, and that those roles can shift from moment to moment." The evening's activities included a community dinner in the store's new cafe space, where Deborah Kelly shared her experience of how the program had helped her family during a difficult time. "But the most important thing wasn't the help we received," she emphasized. "It was learning that we had something valuable to offer others, even in our moment of need." As night fell, the store hosted one of its regular story circles, where community members shared their experiences of transformation. Catherine Morrow, who had been documenting these stories, noted how the language people used had evolved over the month. "They don't talk about charity or helping the less fortunate anymore," Catherine observed. "They talk about community care and shared abundance. It's a fundamental shift in how people see their relationships with each other." The day concluded with a special video call from Shaq himself, who had been keeping up with the store's evolution. His face appeared on the large screen in the community room, his smile as warm as it had been that first night. "What you've created here," he told the gathered community members, "is exactly what I hoped might be possible. But you've taken it so much further than I could have imagined. You've shown that when we lead with genuine care for each other, there's no limit to what a community can become." Lisa Wallace ended the day by gathering her staff and core volunteers for their nightly reflection session. Beverly Davis and her son were there, along with many others who had been part of the original night's events. What we're part of here, Lisa said, looking around the circle, isn't just about toys or even about giving. It's about creating a new kind of space where everyone's dignity is honored, where every interaction is an opportunity for genuine connection, and where we recognize that true abundance comes from how we care for each other. The sociology students finished their observations, but Aaron Sanders had one final note to make. What we've witnessed here, he wrote in his research journal, is nothing less than the emergence of a new model of community organization, one that transcends traditional boundaries between business and social service, between giving and receiving, between help and empowerment. As the last visitors left for the night, Beverly's son carefully straightened the action figure display that had started it all. The toy that had once been the focus of his tears now stood among hundreds of others, each representing a story of connection and community transformation. "Mom," he said, looking up at Beverly with wisdom beyond his years, "I think I finally understand what Mr. Shaq really gave us that night. It wasn't just the toys. It was showing us how to turn sad moments into happy ones for other people." The store's lights dimmed, but the space remained alive with the energy of countless stories of transformation, stories that would continue to inspire and guide the community's evolution. The security cameras captured the final moments of the day. Lisa Wallace walking through the aisles, touching the shelves that now held so much more than just toys. They held the hopes and dreams of a community that had learned to see itself in a new light. And somewhere in Atlanta, Shaquille O'Neal smiled, knowing that his simple response to a child's tears had sparked something far more powerful than any single act of generosity. It had awakened a community to its own capacity for connection, care, and continuous transformation. The story of Wilson's Toy Emporium had become more than just a heartwarming tale of celebrity kindness. It had become a blueprint for how communities could reimagine their relationships with each other, their businesses, and their shared spaces. And in that reimagining, they had discovered something profound, that the greatest gift we can give each other isn't found in any store, but in our willingness to see each moment of need as an opportunity for genuine connection and collective growth. As the night settled over Atlanta, the transformed toy store stood as a beacon of what was possible when one person's moment of compassion ignited a community's imagination. The toys on the shelves were more than just playthings now. They were symbols of a new way of being together, of supporting each other, of turning individual moments of kindness into a sustainable practice of community care. And in homes throughout the city, people who had been touched by the store's transformation went to sleep knowing that they were part of something extraordinary. Not just a story about one night of generosity, but a continuing journey of discovering how much was possible when a community decided to lead with love, connection, and the belief that every person's story mattered. 6 months after Shaquille O'Neal's transformative visit to Wilson's Toy Emporium, the story had evolved far beyond its original narrative. The national media had returned to Atlanta, not to cover another celebrity act of kindness, but to document what experts were calling the Wilson's model, a revolutionary approach to community-centered business that had begun replicating across the country. Lisa Wallace stood in the store's expanded community center, now 3 times its original size, preparing to welcome a delegation of business leaders and community organizers from across the nation. Among them was Timothy Snow, a renowned social impact researcher who had been studying how a single act of kindness had catalyzed such profound systemic change. "What we're witnessing here," Timothy explained to his colleagues, "isn't just about toys or retail transformation. It's about how one authentic moment of connection can reveal possibilities that were always present, but previously invisible to us." The morning began with a presentation from Beverly Davis and her son, whose story had become emblematic of the broader transformation. They no longer simply shared the tale of that fateful night. They now taught others about what they called the anatomy of community transformation. People often ask us about the moment Shaq decided to buy every toy in the store, Beverly explained to the gathered audience. But that wasn't the real miracle. The miracle was how that moment helped us all see what was possible when we started treating every interaction as an opportunity for genuine connection. Kyle Arnold, who had been promoted to Community Relations Director, guided visitors through what had become known as the Journey of Impact, a carefully documented timeline of how the store's transformation had influenced other businesses and communities. In the past 6 months, Kyle shared, pointing to a digital dashboard, we've seen over 50 businesses in Atlanta alone adopt elements of our model. But more importantly, we've documented over 10,000 instances of what we call connection cascades, moments where one act of kindness sparked a series of community-supporting actions. The morning's activities were being filmed by Andrew Pierce, whose documentary about the store's transformation had recently won several awards. His cameras captured a powerful moment when Paul Hansen, a formerly skeptical business consultant, shared how his understanding of successful enterprise had been completely transformed. I used to think business success was all about the bottom line, Paul admitted to the group. But what Wilson's has shown us is that when you prioritize community connection and genuine care, the financial success follows naturally. It's not about choosing between profit and purpose. It's about recognizing that they can reinforce each other. The store itself had evolved into what architects now called a community connection hub. While toys still filled the shelves, the space had been redesigned to facilitate meaningful interactions. Comfortable conversation nooks dotted the aisles, and the walls displayed an ever-growing collection of community stories and photographs. Eric Carrillo, who had been tracking the economic impact of the transformation, presented his latest findings to the visiting delegation. What's remarkable, he noted, is how this model has actually improved all traditional metrics of business success. Customer loyalty is up 300%, employee satisfaction has reached record levels, and profitability has increased while community impact has deepened. The afternoon brought a special session led by John Nelson, a child development expert who had been studying how the store's transformation had affected local children's understanding of community and giving. What we're seeing, he explained, is a fundamental shift in how these children perceive abundance and scarcity. They're learning that true wealth isn't about what you have, it's about the strength of your connections to others. Lisa Quinn, now heading the store's research division, shared data on what they called connection metrics, new ways of measuring business success that went beyond traditional financial indicators. We track things like community care moments, connection quality scores, and support web density, she explained. These metrics help us understand how well we're facilitating genuine community bonds. The day's activities included a demonstration of the store's innovative need-gift matching system developed by Robert Simpson, which helped connect community members' needs with others' abilities to help. The genius of this system, Robert explained, is that it recognizes everyone has both needs and gifts to share. It's not about dividing people into helpers and helped. It's about facilitating mutual support. Mary Ruiz, who had implemented a similar system in her school, shared how the principles from Wilson's had transformed education in her community. We've seen dramatic improvements in student well-being and academic performance, she reported, simply by creating spaces where genuine connection and mutual support are prioritized. The afternoon brought an unexpected visit from Cynthia Guzman, whose early research on the store's transformation had helped shape its evolution. What fascinates me most, she shared with the visitors, is how this model has changed people's fundamental understanding of commerce. Every transaction now carries the potential for deeper community connection. As the day progressed, the store hosted one of its regular community wisdom circles, where people shared stories of how the transformation had affected their lives. Angel Martinez, a teenager who had received help through the store's programs, described how his understanding of community had evolved. "Before I thought getting help meant you were weak," Angel reflected. "Now I understand that being part of a community means sometimes you give help and sometimes you receive it, and both are equally important for making the community stronger." The evening session featured a presentation from David Smith about the store's legacy projects, initiatives designed to ensure the sustainability of their community-centered approach. "We're not just creating programs," David emphasized. "We're cultivating a new way of understanding how businesses can serve as anchors for community well-being." Catherine McGrath, who had been documenting the store's impact on local families, shared stories that demonstrated the ripple effects of their transformation. "We're seeing changes not just in how people shop," she noted, "but in how they relate to each other, how they understand their role in the community, and how they imagine what's possible." The day's events culminated in a special video conference, where Shaquille O'Neal joined the gathering virtually to reflect on how his spontaneous act of kindness had evolved. "What you've created here," he told the assembled group, "goes so far beyond anything I could have imagined. You've shown that when we lead with genuine care and connection, we can transform not just moments, but entire communities." Lisa Wallace closed the day with a powerful presentation about the future of their model. "We're not just running a toy store," she explained. "We're prototyping a new way of thinking about business, community, and human connection. Every day, we're discovering new possibilities for how commerce can serve as a catalyst for community care." Beverly Davis and her son, who had become integral to the store's story, shared their vision for the future. "What started with tears over a toy has become something so much more powerful," Beverly reflected. "We're learning that every moment of need, every interaction, carries the potential for deeper connection and community transformation." The evening concluded with the unveiling of plans for what they called connection centers, new spaces, based on the Wilson's model that would be opening in communities across the country. Aaron Berry, who had been instrumental in designing these centers, explained how they would adapt the core principles to serve different community needs. "The beauty of this model," Aaron shared, "is that it's both universal and adaptable. While the specific offerings might change based on community needs, the fundamental focus on genuine connection and mutual support remains constant." As the visitors prepared to leave, many spoke of how their understanding of business and community had been transformed. Michael Washington, a business leader from another state, summed up what many were feeling. "What we've seen here isn't just a successful business model, it's a blueprint for how we can rebuild the fabric of our communities through authentic connection and care." The day's final moments were captured by Andrew Liu's cameras as Lisa Wallace led the traditional closing ritual, a moment of reflection where staff, volunteers, and community members shared their hopes for the future. "What began with one man's response to a child's tears," Lisa observed, "has revealed something profound about who we can be when we choose to lead with love and connection." Beverly's son, standing beside his mother, held up the action figure that had started it all. "This isn't just a toy anymore," he said, his voice carrying the wisdom of their journey. "It's a reminder that sometimes the things that make us cry can become the things that help us help others." As night fell over Atlanta, the transformed toy store stood as a beacon of what was possible when business and community care were woven together. The toys on the shelves were more than merchandise now. They were bridges to connection, symbols of a new way of being together in community. The security cameras captured the final moments of this historic day. Visitors lingering to share stories, children teaching each other about giving and receiving, and community members planning new initiatives. Each interaction carried the echo of that first night when Shaq's kindness had awakened something powerful in their community. The story of Wilson's Toy Emporium had become more than just a heartwarming tale. It had become a model for how businesses could serve as catalysts for community transformation. And in communities across the country, people were beginning to ask different questions about what was possible when commerce and compassion worked together. As Lisa Wallace locked up the store for the night, she paused to look at the wall of photos documenting their journey. Each image told a story of connection, of transformation, of community members discovering their power to support each other. But more than that, they told the story of what was possible when one person's moment of kindness awakened a community to its own capacity for care and connection. And somewhere in Atlanta, a little boy who had once cried over a toy he couldn't have went to sleep, knowing that his tears had helped create something extraordinary. A new way of understanding how businesses could serve as spaces for genuine connection and community care. A model that was now spreading hope and possibility across the nation. The legacy of that Tuesday evening when Shaq had walked into Wilson's Toy Emporium continued to grow, not just in the lives touched or the systems transformed, but in the fundamental shift in how people understood their connection to each other and their power to create positive change in their communities. As the lights dimmed in the store, the toys stood silent witness to a transformation that had gone far beyond retail. A transformation that had shown how one authentic moment of connection could awaken a community to possibilities that had been there all along, waiting to be discovered in the space between commerce and compassion, between giving and receiving, between individual kindness and collective care.